In the wake of the finale of The Mandalorian, two new characters in particular have earned the ire of many fans of the show. Two scout troopers from the opening of the last episodes. But while these two have been widely branded as dicks for vibe checking the child in that episode, such a label would, as it turns out, be fitting for most scout troopers. Imperial Scout Troopers, as parts of the Stormtrooper Corps, were among the best soldiers in the Empire, and they had additional training that made them a cut above their fellow Stormtroopers. For many Scout Troopers, this went right to their heads.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Imperial Scout Troopers were preceded by the Clone Scout Troopers fielded by the Republic during the Clone Wars, which in turn were an evolution of the Republic ARF Trooper program. Clone Scouts were trained for combat in environments that posed a greater danger on their own than of most planets, and as a result of this, they had specialized equipment and training. Their armor was customized to allow for a greater degree of mobility, and it was usually painted in camouflage to aid in wilderness survival. More importantly, they, like ARF Troopers, received specialized additional training that focused on survival skills and independent reconnaissance. When the Republic became the Empire, the Republic's clone troopers became the first generation of Imperial Stormtroopers. Imperial Scout Troopers became a branch of the Stormtrooper Corps and often served in more independent roles than Clone Scouts had, thanks to changes in military operation after the Clone Wars. As time went on, the ranks of the Stormtrooper Corps began to diversify, filling up with natural-born recruits and other clone lines. The same fate befell the Empire's Scout Troopers. Now, it should quickly be clarified here that the Stormtrooper Corps was not the same as the Imperial Army. The Imperial Army was a separate force composed of generally lesser skilled soldiers, all of them recruits, while the Stormtroopers were meant to be the Empire's best troops, an elite marine force trained for a variety of combat conditions. Even though recruited Stormtroopers were inferior to clones, they were still well trained, well equipped, and far superior to your average soldier. This was especially true for Imperial Scout Troopers. Scout Troopers were trained to be much more mobile in combat than the average Stormtrooper usually was, something that was made possible by their less restrictive gear set. This made them better at fighting in dense forests or in environments that restricted mobility in a similar way. It also made them far better at close quarters combat. Indeed, most Scout Troopers were trained in the use of riot batons and similar melee weapons, and when close range fighters were needed for a mission, they were usually the first ones sent. Scout Troopers were also well trained for the opposite role. Many were employed by the Empire as snipers. Scout Troopers, first and foremost, were scouts, but this made them particularly adept at finding good sniping positions and picking out targets at long range. Sometimes, Imperial commanders used Scout Troopers as rearguards for Imperial assault forces, keeping them out of harm's way while ensuring that their aptitude for sniping was put to use. Frequently, Scout Troopers were equipped with speeder bikes for reconnaissance purposes, and they often rode speeders in combat as well. They were usually very effective in this role, to the extent that, by the time of the Galactic Civil War, most Scout Troopers were paired with 74Z speeder bikes as a matter of protocol. This allowed the Scouts to cover ground more quickly, and it also increased their odds of survival if they encountered enemy forces while on patrol. The most important part of Scout Trooper training was survival skills. As Scout Troopers, by the nature of their job, generally operated far from Imperial supply lines, self-sufficiency was emphasized during training, making most Scout Troopers impressively competent survivalists. Of course, this also made them much more independent than the average Stormtrooper. Teamwork was of course still encouraged, and Scout Troopers were usually sent out in pairs as a result, but the nature of the job meant that most Scout Troopers could expect to eventually find themselves alone on a mission. The Imperial Academies taught them everything they needed to perform solo missions, at least as far as survival training went. Scout Troopers were also well equipped, more so than your average Stormtrooper. They had lighter armor, which wasn't as protective as that of the Stormtrooper kit, but granted much better maneuverability. In particular, the HUDs on their helmets were much better suited to reconnaissance missions, as it came with built-in macro binoculars, target magnification software, a night vision mode, and an option that allowed for energy emission detection. Scout Troopers were usually provided plenty of survival equipment, including, but not limited to, personal medical kits, extra food supplies, portable power units, microcords, flares, R4 recon droids, shielded comlinks, water purification kits, camouflage portable chargers, and sometimes even armor modifications depending on the environment that they would be operating in. That said, Scout Troopers did have one critical disadvantage. They weren't allowed to customize their armor as with the rest of the Stormtrooper Corps. As a result, their shiny white body buckets stuck out like sore thumbs in pretty much any environment, leaving them vulnerable and easy to spot. The Empire, evidently, never learned that military uniformity doesn't count for much when your scouts are easy to see coming. As far as weapons go, Scout Troopers were usually less well armed than Stormtroopers, though they were still better armed than the average rebel. Their primary weapons were EC-17 holdout blaster pistols, compact weapons that were nonetheless good to have in a pinch. They were the best close quarters blasters the Empire had, and so, while Scout Troopers were often also equipped with a standard E11 blaster rifle, they usually relied on their pistols. Those Scout Troopers who served as snipers were also given E11 sniper rifles, the purpose of which is pretty self-evident. When used as close quarters fighters, Scout Troopers were equipped with stun batons, which were effective for use against most melee weapons. When smaller Imperial garrisons received reports of Jedi, Scout Troopers with stun batons were usually the first units deployed, as their batons were somewhat effective against lightsabers, and at any rate, they stood a better chance of victory than even the best of Stormtroopers. In addition, most Scout Troopers had personal recon droids and grenades of some sort, not counting the last resort thermal detonators that they had clipped to the back of their belts. Some Scout Troopers, especially those who served as snipers, were even equipped with portable auto turrets. By the time of the Galactic Civil War, most Scout Troopers also had 74Z speeder bikes at their disposal. 74Zs were top-of-the-line models at the time with unparalleled speed and maneuverability. Of course, their performance was only ever as good as their riders were, and many cocky Scout Troopers discovered this the hard way when they crashed into trees or similar obstacles. All things considered, Scout Troopers were some of the best of the Stormtrooper Corps. Their superiors usually regarded them highly for their skills, which earned the ire of their regular Stormtrooper comrades, who viewed this as favoritism. Scout Troopers and Stormtroopers frequently fought each other, leading most Imperial garrison commanders to segregate the two groups. It didn't help, of course, that the Scout Troopers did absolutely nothing to limit this internal friction. On the contrary, they made it worse. The Scout Troopers knew full well that they were better trained, and many of them were determined not to let anyone forget it. They treated anyone of equal or lower rank as inferiors and mostly kept to themselves, ostracizing Stormtroopers or other specialized units. Some of them even made a sport of being assholes, deliberately acting as belligerent and as insufferable as they could among the Stormtroopers. In the words of one officer from the 439th Legion, by and large, they seem to be egotistical, unpleasant braggarts. That particular platoon of Scout Troopers was a pretty good example of how the Scouts acted in regards to their Stormtrooper comrades. The Imperial fortress they were designed to guard was rather expensive, and so they developed a tendency to race their speeder bikes through its halls. The problem was that they did this at night, very late at night. The loud roar of the bikes frequently woke up the Stormtroopers and other non-Scout soldiers at the base, who became so livid at the constant disruptions in their sleep cycles that the base's commander began housing the Scouts in a separate facility out of concern for their safety. So, that's our analysis of the Empire's Scout Troopers and why they were particularly notorious for their dickery. But what do you think? Can you think of any other Star Wars units that were more insufferable than the Scout Troopers? Make sure you let us know in the comments section below. And as per usual, just before you go, make sure you check out all the links in the description below to join the wider Geeksleys community, including our main Discord server where you can interact with other Star Wars fans such as yourself, our Geeksleys gaming network where you can play games with other Star Wars fans such as yourself, including Garry's Mod and Roblox, and the Patreon if you want to help support the channel more than you already are by watching this video. And by doing so, you get access to a super secret behind the scenes Discord where you can check out everything that we do early. Videos, thumbnails, Instagram posts, Facebook posts, all of that, you name it. So make sure you check that out, guys. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.